Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for another breakfast with Blaha. And today I'm having Greek yogurt, frozen blueberries, and natural peanut butter. All right, let's talk about BMI, bulking, and drug-free lifters. This came up in my comments. Of course, by the time this video's up, it'll have been in the comments a month ago. Someone said, hey, you've said in the past that BMI applies to people not on gear. Yeah, and it absolutely does. It absolutely applies to them. But they're like, so how are you saying people should to bulk up to whatever? Isn't that a contradiction? No, because when we are in a bulking phase, if you're saying, hey, I want to get as big as my frame will allow me to get without using anything, you're going to have to bulk to an obese BMI and then cut back down. And what do I mean by obese? Am I saying that you need to carry 50 pounds of extra fat? No, that's morbidly obese. But you're going to have to get fat by bodybuilding standards. You're going to have to, or you're never going to reach that. So let's throw out a little bit of numbers that I looked up earlier. Average American male is 5'9". Right? That's the average height in America. We're one of the taller countries in the world on average. But again, I'll assume for purposes that's our average baseline, 5'9". To get to a 25 fat-free mass index, which what I usually tell you guys is probably your absolute limit. And when I say that, people get upset. And we're talking about at a lower body fat. If you're down about 10% body fat or less, you're not going above a 25 fat-free mass index. So, you get people who say, well, how long should it take to reach there? I don't know. I know guys have been working on it for 20 years. I have a really good friend. He comments down below under the name Croton79, and it's Nikola Ella. When he cuts down, he's at about a 24.8 fat-free mass index when he's ripped. We ran the numbers once. It only took him 23 years to get there. He's in his early 40s now. Took him 23 years to get there. So, and again, he's very genetically gifted. Everyone thinks he's on gear. Right? So the 25 holds. I don't know exceptions. 24 would be really good for most of you to get to. If you can get to a 24 fat-free mass index in 10 to 12 years, that's really, really good. But we've got to look at that and say, okay, what is that in terms of weight? What's a 25 fat-free mass index at 10% body fat at 5'9"? It's about 188 pounds. Okay? It's in the low 80s on the kilos, in kg. 188. Anybody think you're going to get there staying 10% body fat? No. No. The delusional world you live in where you think you're going to pull that off. Nico doesn't do it. He bulks. He gets up over 200 pounds. He gets up to 210. Things like that. 210, 215. And then he cuts back down to under 200. That's what it's taken for him to get there. And to put it in perspective, what are his lifts look like? The guy can squat 550. I've seen him deadlift 630. He reps 315 on the flat bench. He has never maxed on it. Pretty strong for a drug-free guy, and he can still do that usually when he trims down under 200. I mean, that's pretty damn good. If you're walking around at 195, you can hit those numbers. And he's about 43. Doing pretty good, but he's bodybuilder. So, but how heavy do you have to bulk? Well, a lot of people who try to do the really lean thing, they try to stay between 10 and 15% body fat year-round. They bulk to 15%, cut back down to 10. That's a hard way to do it. It's going to be slower that way. Now, guys who really, really, really care about maintaining a certain look year round, that's what they do. And plenty of good experts recommend that too. Lyle McDonald, actually, I've seen him write in books multiple times. That's really ideal for bodybuilders, for example, because they don't want to be above 15% because they got to cut down contest lean. So it makes sense. But for most of you, if you're trying to really get big, you may need to go up to 20% body fat, 18, 20%. I don't recommend you go above that, but you may need to be in that range for a while. But if you're talking about getting to that level of size, we start getting to those body fat percentages. We're hitting obesity, because obese for 5'9" is around 200 pounds. That's like a 30 BMI, about 200 pounds. Well, if you're carrying that sort of lean mass, you're getting into the high teens. Right? You're getting into the high teens. Ballpark, without me running numbers, I'd say that's probably 16% body fat for someone with a 25 fat-free mass index. Now, how many of you are ever going to get to that 25? And here's the other thing. When we are bulking up, is all of that fat? In other words, if you're 200 pounds, though, is all 12 of those pounds fat? No, some of it's lean weight. Some of it's water. That's the other thing people forget. When you go from a bulk to a cut, you usually gain and lose 5 pounds in the first week. I do. If I am at maintenance and I go into a deficit, I will lose 3 pounds in the first 2 days. If I go into a surplus, I will gain 5 pounds in 24 hours. If I've been cutting and I go into a surplus, I'll gain 10 pounds in the first week on a small surplus. Then you go back to just gaining a pound a week. You've got lean weight to think about when you're in a surplus. That's going to make the scale higher. You're going to have extra, so you've got water weight and intramuscular glycogen and water. You have extra connective tissue through your fat. So when you're cutting, you lose lean weight on a DEXA scan just from fat loss, because there's connective tissue in the fat around it that does change in size slightly when you gain and lose weight. Do you guys see where I'm going with this? So someone bulking up to, say, 18 to 20%, you start saying, okay, are they carrying an extra 3 pounds of lean tissue from the body fat? They're carrying an extra 5 pounds of water weight. This stuff starts to accumulate. Before long, you're like, well, how heavy is this person having to bulk? Let's say they just want to get to the 24 fat-free mass index and then cut back. They might be hitting 205, right? But that's like a 31 BMI, something like that. And what I would suggest, if we're talking longevity, you probably shouldn't hang out there a real long time. So again, BMI applies here for health purposes. Again, we can argue we have more wiggle room due to muscle mass, because muscle is far more metabolically healthy than fat. But if your goal is to get to a certain size and then trim back down, you're not staying at that body weight for years and years on end. And that's where we're concerned at. Are you at a high BMI due to body fat for years on end? Well, that does start to have some minor health risk. Now, if it's just in the obese range and you're carrying a lot of muscle, it's not really that bad. I mean, again, compared to the average person, you're still 20 times healthier. But to say that it's risk-free, And here's the other thing that we have to look at. Someone who is a drug-free lifter, if you start exceeding a 30 BMI, you're basically fat, right? You start getting past the beginning of the obese thing, you're not using any gear. You're not carrying an extra 10 pounds, 15 pounds of muscle tissue. You're getting fat. And people have to accept that. Yes, BMI does count. A person is fat at that point. And there are some health risks. But we could make the point that when we start getting to morbid obesity, even if you're lean, there's health risk, right? But how much gear are you having to use to be there? In other words, someone with a 35 BMI who's at 12% body fat, they're not being conservative with what they use. They're using a lot. Very high doses of anabolics, I know this is going to come as a shock to people, has health risks. So we could still say that BMI represents something there. It gives us more wiggle room because, again, we're far more metabolically healthy if the weight is muscle versus fat. But let's come back over to people who aren't on anything. That BMI still applies to you. Is it reduced in the effects, the negative effects? Yes. Does it go to zero? No. So it still applies, but we also come over to the point of how are you going to gain muscle? You're not going to sit at 12% body fat or 10% body fat year round and gain muscle. That's not going to happen. You're not going to make gains. You're going to spend 5 years spinning your wheels. So there's a balance to be had, and it's what you have to think through as far as what you are willing to do, how far you're willing to go. But by that same token, yes, we could say there are health risks associated with the higher BMI. Absolutely. Is it enormous? And in other words, if a 5'9" guy bulks to 205 for a couple of years and then trims back down, has he dramatically harmed his health, especially if he's 25, 30 years old? Probably not. He's probably in phenomenal health if his diet and everything else is on point. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.